This is History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians Thornton Kennedy and James Ottley.
And welcome back to History for Cocktail Parties. I'm Thornton Kennedy, and here with our host, James Ottley.
Co-host.
How are you, James?
I'm doing great, man. It's great to be here.
We are in our new studio, which is a very small space.
Hoping that the sound quality reflects that.
Always be improving.
Yes, sir.
The next few episodes are going to be on the Panama Canal.
Hugely important topic.
And a timely topic. We like to try to keep our history aligned with current events. And right now we have a lot going on with trade. We have a lot going on with moving items across the oceans. And we have a president of the United States that would like to reclaim the Panama Canal. There is a certain sect of people who are very disappointed that Georgia's own president, Jimmy Carter, gave the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians in 1977. And it's just one of those topics that I don't think many people know the true history of it. They don't know that the French did largely half of the excavation work. They don't know that the United States picked it up for pennies on the dollar and basically finished a vision of, well, as you'll get into, a vision that goes back to several different countries. And a lot of people looked at that map and thought that they could build a canal through there.
Absolutely. But before we get into that, that's a great summary, Thornton. Before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor, Play LLC, because business is serious. But who wants serious, stodgy marketing? Check out our friends at Play, a full-service advertising agency. They're deep in the mix with AI and digital know-how, driving more people to your door. And whether it's IRL, in real life, or virtual, Play ensures the right people find and buy what you are selling. See the many case studies at goplaydesign.com. That's goplaydesign.com. And start growing your business today.
Awesome. Thank you, Play. We really appreciate your support always.
Indeed.
Now, James, I always have to ask you this question. Where do we begin when you're talking about one of the modern marvels of engineering?
It should be one of the seventh wonders of the world if it's not, you know. And you're going to argue with me on this or be upset with me probably, but we're going to start way, way back.
First, God created life.
No, not that far back. Not that far back. But the first European to cross the Isthmus, that's going to be troubling for me to say.
There are going to be a couple of words. Isthmus is going to be one of those that's going to come up. Culebra, cut is going to come up a lot. There are going to be a lot of words that are going to be mangled by us.
Especially after the first cocktail. But anyway, the first European to cross the Isthmus was Vasco Núñez de Balboa, who crossed it in 1513. And it's only about 40 miles. But he was looking for gold. Found out or heard that there was a kingdom on the other side. He started on the Caribbean side and made his way across. And on September 1, 1513, he starts this expedition from the Caribbean side. He's got 190 Spanish troops with him and a bunch of native guides and a pack of dogs. And 28 days later, he reaches the Pacific, and he calls it the South Sea. And he calls it the South Sea because if you look at the map,
right, you
actually travel north to south in this area to get from the Caribbean down to the Pacific. And so that is the origin of the term the South Seas. And interestingly, he did not die of malaria or yellow fever like everybody else seemed to down there.
How did he die?
Well, glad you asked that. He actually had his head chopped off. The new governor of the region sent over from Spain was jealous of him. And a whole other story, but a tragic end for him. And it kind of sets the tone in a way for
what happens in the Panama Isthmus.
Yeah, exactly. But because of this discovery, the Panamanian currency is the Balboa. Balboa Port, which is the Pacific entrance to the canal, is named after him. And perhaps most significantly for our Arrested Development fans, Balboa Island, where the frozen banana stand is named for Mr. Balboa.
I did not know that
in there. Another kind of interesting factoid and a tie-in to our Federal Reserve episodes, which you loved so much, was a guy named William Patterson, who founded a short-lived Scottish colony on the Isthmus, Panama in 1698. Right. It's called the Darien Scheme.
Right.
It failed within a year for the usual reasons, disease and also resistance from Spain. But this failure contributed to Scotland's financial collapse and its union with England, actually, in 1707. And it was Patterson who was one of the founding members of the Bank of England, which was one of the first major European central banks. That was 1694, and we talked about that in our 5 to 10 Federal Reserve episodes.
But journey through the Federal Reserve.
It was quite a journey, an odyssey, if you will. So let's fast forward to the 1800s, and a common theme here is that people really wanted to believe in this project, and they flew by the seat of their pants. I mean, the people that really started proposing
when you look at it on a map.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the reality is that to get goods around from the Orient to Paris, New York, you have to go all the way around South America tip.
That's right.
There's this really thin piece of land right in between the two continents.
On paper, looks like a piece of cake. But they don't show the jungle, and they don't show the mosquitoes.
And you're going to make this point.
Yes, I will.
A lot of the people who are experts on this never actually step foot.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about, and this theme continues throughout our story. These people that first suggested or really started proposing the idea of a canal across Central America were adventurers and explorers and dreamers. They were not engineers. Right. They had no technical background. And it really is. It's a common theme, the leaping before you look phenomenon that plays through our story.
And it's going to take such an outsized role when we finally get to the Frenchman that makes it happen.
Absolutely. Whose name hopefully we can pronounce.
I'm not even going to try.
Okay. But the first one to seriously suggest a canal across Central America was Alexander von Humboldt. And he was he did an extensive 5-year exploration through South America and parts of Central America. This was 1799 to 1804. He was a famous German naturalist and explorer. He came up with the Humboldt route, which was a canal route through or across Nicaragua. But like you said, he never set foot in Nicaragua or any of the other 4 countries or areas that he proposed, canal alternatives.
He had one in Mexico, one at the Darien Gap.
Right.
He had the 5.
Nicaragua, right.
Panama.
And so he built his thesis from hearsay, from old books and manuscripts. Right. How he never managed to set foot, in these countries where he said as an expert that you could build a canal there is just mind-blowing. He did say that Panama was the worst choice. He said that the mountains were...
Absolutely.
Well, and we'll get into that, but he said the mountains were 3 times higher actually than they were. I mean, he was right, but he made up his reasons for it. But he wrote the political essay on the Kingdom of New Spain. Thousands of copies were printed and circulated. He was the high priest of modern science. He was described as a university unto himself. So people took him seriously. So another kind of interesting thing about this guy was he stayed with Thomas Jefferson in the spring of 1804 at the end of his journey or his odyssey. And that coincided with the departure of the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Interesting.
And it's likely that his stay at the executive mansion, they didn't call it the White House yet, marked the start of presidential interest in an interoceanic canal.
Interesting.
Yeah. The next guy to propose a route for a canal, again, no business doing so. His name was Edward Cullen, and he in 1850 crossed the Isthmus, and he said that, oh man, I did it effortlessly. He said that he just walked right across. He marked a trail. The elevation was no problem. There were no, mountains or hills above 150 feet above sea level. It was a miracle route, and it caused a sensation. Absolutely.
Everybody wanted to find the Cullen route. It was all clearly marked. All you had to do was get down there and walk into the woods. And you'd see these clear signs.
Yes, that he had placed
across the isthmus.
Yeah, and that was obviously not the case. But this excitement, this sensation, a bunch of countries decided to make a multinational expedition to Darien to cross and mark this trail and really study it as a possible route. And the Americans sent down Navy Lieutenant Isaac Strain.
Right.
And that's a perfect word. I mean, like so apropos, or name, I should say.
For someone who's about to
go through a pretty awful.
Thinking that Cullen had, this route is easy. Everything you've read is that this should not be much of a challenge.
Absolutely.
Straight.
And so for
Strain,
and for that reason, the Americans got there first before the other, countries did. And he said, well, God, if it's so easy, I'm I'm anxious,
He doesn't wait for the other to come. He just marches his soldiers into the Panamanian jungle.
27 of them, 27 folks. Remember, Balboa did it with 190 Spanish troops and several hundred natives who knew the way. And at this point, he's looking for this trail. Cullen's trail is nowhere to be found.
Of course.
I mean, not marked, not, absolutely fallacy.
But does he turn around?
No, he does not. No. He proceeds forward. His food runs out. And again, he's the thing that I think we really need to kind of focus on, and that they should have focused on, was the jungle. I mean, it's only 40 miles,
right?
From sea to sea.
Thick, hard
absolutely
jungle.
Mosquitoes, snakes. I mean, just the worst, And so he can't find the trail. His food runs out. Yeah. The rifles rust. They're forced to eat toads and palm nuts that burn the enamel off their teeth. I mean, just not a pleasant place to be. 7 of his guys died. So finally, Strain staggers in. He's torn up, bleeding, naked. He's a living skeleton. Yeah. He's got ulcers all over his body. He's down to 75 pounds. He never recovers. He dies 3 years later at age 36. And so
cussing Cullen's name.
Absolutely. And so Cullen arrives on another ship. Strain has already proceeded forward, and he realizes something is amiss. And he makes a retreat back. He gets back on his ship and heads to New York. And it's kind of shades of Bill Murray, in Caddyshack, kind of slinking away from the golf course, after the guy has been struck by lightning. But, Cullen, despite this just awful disaster, perfect word, says, it was just the expedition was misled, that, he had no business proceeding without him.
He blames Strain.
He blames Strain. And
it's crazy.
And he sticks to his story. And the crazy thing is, later, people still believe, and they want to believe, got to believe in this miracle route. And so he still has some credibility despite this just disaster of an expedition.
And that's another thing that's going to happen, is people who should have zero credibility continue to have credibility.
Right. And so the third guy that people listened to, and again, had no business listening to him because he had no technical training, no scientific training, no engineering or surveying training, was a guy named John Lloyd Stephens. And he was this engaging, romantic, red-bearded lawyer. He was the author of popular travel books, and he passed through Nicaragua on his way to the Mexican provinces of Chiapas and Yucatan in 1840, looking for the lost cities of the Maya, which he actually found. He actually did find it. And he wrote The Incidents of Travel in Central America, instant bestseller, sold copies all over the world, described as a thrilling piece, and he was seen as the beginning of American archaeology. But he had no more business making pronouncements on the feasibility of a Nicaragua canal than A. Thornton Kennedy, And he said, you could build a canal here, and, quote, the Nicaraguan canal posed no major problems, close quote. And just a little, one more point on this guy's credibility. He's a travel writer. He said, in fact, Nicaragua could become one of the finest resort areas in the land or in the world if a canal was built here. He said, I scaled this volcano, Masaya, and at home, this volcano would be worth a fortune, with a good hotel on top, a railing to keep the children from falling in, a zigzagging staircase down both sides.
To go into the volcano.
And a glass of lemonade at the bottom. So this is one of the so-called experts that people are listening to on the idea of the feasibility.
On the rim of a volcano.
Right. With stairs going down and a glass of lemonade.
Right by the lava.
But there'd be a rail to keep the children in. Yeah, exactly. So
practical.
Yeah. But this is the typical guy that people are listening to at this time. But man, this was the age of canals. The Erie Canal had been built in the 1820s. And it was the longest canal in the world. It had cleared elevations over its route of nearly 700 feet. Yeah. And on paper, like you said, if you look at the map, the canal at Panama, I mean, it seemed like it was no big deal, not unrealistic. And again, these people making these determinations with no actual scientific facts, no surveys. Even DeWitt Clinton, who was the father of the Erie Canal, jumped into the game. And he joined up with the guy that built the aqueduct to bring fresh water to New York City, and they started working on a passage for a canal through Nicaragua. Again, all of this, no surveys, no technical information about the terrain, no experience about jungles, just crazy. The one cautionary voice was a guy named Charles Biddle, who was sent by Andrew Jackson. He paddled up the Chagres River in Panama with a canoe, and his summary was, quote, "Any talk of a Panama Canal was utter foolishness and ought to be clear to all men of whether of common sense or uncommon sense that this was a bad idea." He didn't even bother to go to Nicaragua. Like, this is stupid, And again, I love some of the quotes. My research was done, most of it through a book written by Stephen Ambrose. And a quote from that book, he says, "The truth is, all canal prospects, every cost estimate were hopelessly unrealistic, if not preposterous. And the assertions that the task would be simple were written by fools or by men who had either no appropriate competence or who, if they did, had never laid eyes on a rainforest."
He was not wrong.
He was not wrong.
He was 100% on track.
So about this time, 1846, again, there's all this excitement about building a canal. And so a guy named, who was the American Charge d'Affaires, Benjamin Alden Bidlack, acting on his own initiative, not from a directive from Washington, signed a treaty with the Colombian president providing for passage over the Isthmus there. And the treaty, it actually was ratified.
He just went down there apropos of his own volition and got a treaty with the Colombian government.
Got his name in the history books.
Because that is, just remind us, that is part of Colombia.
Absolutely. And that'll come up in our story later. This is still part of Colombia. And the treaty provided a right of transit across the Isthmus of Panama, quote, "upon any modes of communication that now exist or may be hereinafter constructed." And that's going to come.
Such a brilliant little concession.
Absolutely. And incidentally, the president, he was cool. He left office the next week. So he's kind of like, yeah, whatever, man, whatever. So, but it guaranteed perfect neutrality of the Isthmus and guaranteed Colombia, as it was called, that area was called New Granada or Granada at the time, right of sovereignty. And it was the agreement that made the Panama Railroad a reality. And they actually came back, Teddy Roosevelt, we'll talk about this in a later episode, came back and said, well, maybe we can, well, I don't want to jump ahead. Right. Anyway, but this Bidlack.
That's my job.
That's right. Bidlack Treaty, remember that. But, up until this point, there was not a single wagon road anywhere across the entire Isthmus of Panama prior to 1848. So everything up to this point, I mean, it was a lot of talk, a lot of dreams, but there was one single event that arguably did more to bring the canal into reality than anything else. And that one thing was this. January 1848, a carpenter from New Jersey saw something shiny at the bottom of a mill race in Coloma, California. The gold rush. The gold rush was on.
Everything.
Now, we, of course, both being from Georgia, we need to remind our listeners that the first
gold rush was right here, Dahlonega.
1828. So that gets looked over a little bit, but that was
one of the things that stuck out to me is, okay, so you're getting all this gold, and it actually is more difficult to transport the gold across the continent. It is actually more efficient to sail it.
Absolutely.
Because of the mountains, or because of all the impediments to getting your gold from California to New York
Or how about just getting there in the first place?
Just getting there in the first place.
Right.
So a ship is actually the more efficient way to get from, quote, unquote, New York all the way to California.
That's right. There were 3 routes to New El Dorado, as they called it. There was the Plains across, the Horn around, and the Isthmus over. And a lot of people, people took all 3 routes. But if you took...
It just seems insane to me that you would take a gold and go around the tip of South America.
13,000 miles.
13,000 miles. Instead of going across the continent, which is taking your life into your own hands.
Absolutely. Or going via Panama, which was 5,000 miles. But if you went across the country on a wagon, there's no railroad at that point.
Right.
And so...
and the Rocky Mountains were prohibitive.
Absolutely. And other factors as well. But so they built a railroad. Panama Railroad began in 1850. They thought they were going to finish it. And I'm going to mention this because that was kind of the first exposure to just how difficult it is to build anything in a freaking jungle, in a rainforest. And so they thought, oh man, we're going to finish this railroad in 2 years. It cost 5 years. It took 5 years at a cost of $8 million. This was 6 times their estimate. It was the world's first transcontinental railroad.
And was the great...
But it was only 40 miles. But
the great quote that went with it was that there was a dead person for every railroad tie.
It was one dead man for every railroad tie between Colon and Panama City.
And that really sets one of the big challenges of going through Panama is that there is a tremendous amount of death from malaria,
disease,
and yellow fever.
Right.
And they think at the time that it's disturbing the ground, that it comes up from the ground. They have no idea.
The gases.
They have no idea.
Well, that's the term. Malaria comes from bad air.
Right.
Yeah.
So they think if they're shoveling the ground, that's what's disturbing.
Right.
So
it's the swamps. Right.
Don't disturb the ground. No, it was the railroad was an incredibly arduous build.
It was absolutely. And to kind of follow up on that quote that you just mentioned, one dead man for every single railroad tie. There were 74,000 railroad ties.
Oh, Lord.
It wreaked havoc, and people died. Laborers were brought in from all over the world, and the book made my research indicated the Chinese died just as frequently as the rest, which I found interesting because I don't know if you've read about the Transcontinental Railroad. That was built.
Is that a future episode for History for Cocktail Parties?
Perhaps. But the people that really built that and saved that railroad were the Chinese. Yes. And one of the reasons was because, in addition to being hard workers, they drank tea rather than drank water. A lot of people got, diseases and whatnot from just, drinking the water and stuff, stuff that was in the water. They boiled their water and drank tea. And so I found it kind of interesting that.
But in the tropics, it's mosquitoes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not.
Exactly.
It's not, ingesting water.
Right. But
and they don't know that. They have no idea.
I know. And it's a fascinating discovery, which we'll hopefully cover in one of our later episodes. But I think that was the first, it was Americans' first exposure to the reality on the ground of just the jungle, the rain, the bugs, the disease. And you mentioned,
it was a very profitable railroad.
Oh, incredibly.
A
bonanza.
It cost them a lot of money to build it. It cost a lot of lives. And look, all due respect to the lives, it made the investors a tremendous amount of money.
In the first 6 years, it made $7 million. The cost was $8 million plus a lot of dead people.
This is 1850s money.
That's right. And it was the highest priced stock. The company, the Pacific Mail Steamship Company, was the owner who built that railroad, and its stock in those years was $295 a share, highest priced stock on the New York Stock Exchange.
That's incredible.
Right, and it was the most expensive line on earth to construct and to travel on. A one-way ticket was $25 in gold.
Wow.
Yeah, but it saved a lot of time.
It saved a lot of time, but you did have to get to the port.
You did.
You had to unload all of your gold.
Right.
Your gold had to be transported onto the railroad.
Exactly.
Then you had to bring it across. Then you had to unload it, bring it back onto a ship.
But that didn't stop people. 400,000 people traveled on this railroad from 1856 to 1866.
I guess I'm pointing out that it is a lot more efficient. It's still inefficient.
Absolutely.
There's still going to be a drive.
Right.
In my mind,
for a canal.
In my mind, I thought, okay, you can now cross the Isthmus with a railroad efficiently. But the reality is that there was still a need.
Still got to unload it. I mean, it's not the same. You can't unload an entire cargo ship, put it on this rickety railroad.
But they build a dang, and I think the Panama Railroad ends up being the reason that the Panama Canal is built where it is.
And
everyone gets their mind around the idea that this thing is already here. There's already infrastructure.
Right.
Let's just follow the existing infrastructure.
That's right.
Even
That's right.
though everybody else says it's a nightmare.
But I think you could also argue, I mean, in the same way that like it was one of the biggest catalysts for, hey, let's actually build a canal here. I think it also could be viewed as a pretty big hurdle. I mean, if people had learned their lesson, they saw firsthand the death and disease that just flourished, and that was a part of building something in this area. It could have been, people with more level heads could have been like, look, this was the biggest pain in the neck that we ever encountered. There's no way we could construct a canal here. But they did not learn that lesson.
They did not learn that lesson. Well, it was greed. It was the need to move. That just
Absolutely.
blind spots in history, if you will.
It was the worst place to send men to build anything. It was known as a pest hole since the earliest Spanish settlement. As you mentioned, one dead man for every railroad tie, 74,000 ties. Laborers were brought in from all over the world. Just dead people everywhere. In fact, a trade developed of shipping cadavers pickled in large barrels to medical schools and hospitals, all over the world. I mean, it was just a really grotesque event. And
that's the railroad. When we get to the actual building of the canal, it gets even grimmer.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's kind of funny, he wasn't president then, but Ulysses S. Grant crossed the railroad at that time, crossed the Isthmus on the railroad, and with a military detachment, and they had 150. It was the rainy season, 150 people died just
on that one trip.
Right, and he said, "quote The horrors of the road in the rainy season are beyond description." But that didn't stop him. I mentioned,
because Grant does send an expedition down.
He sure does.
Okay,
he sure does. But good foreshadowing.
Thank you.
Right. So we talked about how Panama was not the only route that these explorers and dreamers talked about. There were Nicaragua, and in fact, the U.S. and Great Britain almost came to war over Nicaragua at the beginning of the gold rush. Great Britain was actually very interested in building a canal in Nicaragua. I don't know. I mean, there was already the Monroe Doctrine. I don't know how they even had the gall to think that they could do this, but they sent a couple of gunboats down to Nicaragua. They captured the town of San Juan del Norte, which was going to be on the proposed entrance to the Nicaragua Canal if it was built there, and renamed it Greytown. And the crisis, again, it almost came. We almost had another War of 1812, in 1848. But the crisis was averted by the U.S. and Britain coming to a treaty or an agreement that if the canal was built anywhere in Central America, it would be a joint effort. And both countries would control it and have sovereignty over it. And this was the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty of 1850. I did a little research. I thought, God, I wonder if this is the Clayton of, Clayton, Georgia, or Clayton County. A lot of people, drive.
Name themselves after.
Right. And a lot of people drive that we know. They drive to yourself.
You through Clayton, Georgia.
Through Clayton, Georgia. Beautiful Lake Raven, Lake Burton, going to Highlands. Not a different guy. Different guy.
I thought you were really going to land.
No,
that.
I wish I could, but different guy. But so all through this time, people were taking these different routes. Nicaragua. I'm going to really massacre this one, but Tehuantepec across Mexico.
Southern Mexico.
Southern Mexico. Never really serious because there was a lot of revolutions going on and political unrest in Mexico. And actually somebody even proposed on that route that they build a railroad, not a canal, but like this massive railroad where you would take your ship and put the
ship on the railroad.
Put the whole ship on the railroad and take it across.
I love that.
That's a great solution.
It is. Just drive your ship. It's just like going through a car wash. Just put your ship up here.
Put it on the trailer.
We'll lock it up.
That's right. That never came to pass. But I think it speaks to kind of like, this was the age of dreamers and of possibilities and whatnot.
And adventuring,
yes.
just a curiosity about the map and wanting to go someplace and do something big.
Absolutely. Panama, was the shortest. It was the shortest overland passage.
Yeah, and we'll put this in our social media. But when you look at the map, not only is it north to south, which is counterintuitive, but it is so narrow.
Right.
It is 50 miles.
I think it's right around 40.
40
right
miles.
40 miles.
It's 40 miles across. The Suez Canal is triple that distance.
It is 120 miles.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And it's, I don't know, just for the kind of sake of looking at these different routes, it was 500 miles shorter and 2 days faster to go across Nicaragua. They didn't have a railroad, but you get on a steamer and then you go on these big lakes like Nicaragua.
There was a huge lake in the middle of Nicaragua.
That's right. Still is.
Yeah.
And Vanderbilt actually built the system of traveling across Nicaragua.
Did he really?
Yeah. And so that was, one of the possibilities. And then, like we said, the Tehuantepec route was never, people just crossed it. But, these were all the various considerations. Nicaragua wasn't a death trap. That was one of its benefits. So finally...
Nicaragua, it's interesting because Nicaragua could have been a resort. It wouldn't have been bad. Just don't build the resort on the rim of a volcano.
That's right.
Just build it on the beach.
You don't think the lemonade at the bottom of the volcano
I
saved it?
He was just off by a few miles.
Yes, exactly.
Just stay by the beach. It's beautiful. It's not as insane as some of those other areas.
Maybe you're living in the wrong epoch, Thornton.
Clearly.
You could have been one of the guys we're talking about,
Would have built a nice little resort right there and had my little
canal
glass of lemonade before you even walk into the jungle.
Indeed. So finally, President Grant, even though he had crossed in Panama, orders an action and seen what a just death trap it was, he orders an actual scientific engineering study of Nicaragua and Panama. And like I said, it's kind of interesting because he had seen how bad Panama was.
Yeah.
And so he organizes the Selfridge expeditions from 1870 to 1875. And they first go to Panama. And I mean, they actually hack through the jungles. They battle the tropical diseases.
They do such a good job.
They do.
They actually mark everything correctly. They do all the correct geological surveys. Everything is done. And they come back and say,
dumb idea.
No.
Yeah, no freaking way, right? And so then they did a second expedition to Nicaragua in 1872, and this was I guess a little bit easier than Panama, but in fact I think once they were done with these, I think Grant was more in favor of Nicaragua than Panama, and like you said, these were more detailed surveys. These were real scientific.
And this is going to come up later, but
he professionalized the process.
The French just outright dismiss all of the American surveys, and the American surveys were so good. So when it comes to brass tacks, the Americans pull out all these maps, and the French are like, where did these things come from?
Here's the crazy thing is that we're going to talk about the Lesseps in a minute, or maybe in our next episode, but he got dead set on Panama, damn the torpedoes or whatever, because Nicaragua had become the American plan. And so he says,
just contrary.
I'm just not even going to look at that. Panama it is,
I always wondered why it was that he got so fixated on Panama over Nicaragua.
I think it was that.
He would not listen to anyone.
Absolutely. And the other thing, and we'll get to that, is like why he had to have it, I guess because it was the Suez Canal, which we'll get to. I'm jumping ahead. But anyway, so strategically, it was the smart thing to do for Grant to order these expeditions.
Correct.
Because U.S. naval power. I mean, all of the
Americans got a lot better information off of those two expeditions than anybody had gotten to that point.
That's right, and obviously for sea power, manifest destiny, all of it, it would make sense for the U.S. to have a canal route across the Isthmus, or across Central America somewhere. And it was kind of, but not only was it strategically a good idea for him to organize these expeditions, but it was also politically expedient because, I mean, this was the age. It was kind of like JFK's moonshot, man. This was the age in its time of scientific discovery. There was widespread excitement and interest in scientific discovery in all different areas. One-armed John Powell, don't ask me about this, in the interest of science, had done an expedition down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon in 1869. People were really excited about that. Nathaniel Marsh of Yale, first professor of paleontology, had unearthed fossils to complete and show the full evolution of the horse. Most dramatic demonstrations of Darwin theory. Jules Verne had written 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Brooklyn Bridge had begun. Harvard had elected a chemist. The Transatlantic Railroad in 1869 was completed. Suez Canal, which we'll talk about, completed in 1869. I mean, it was possible to travel the world in 1/10 of the time now.
And the engineering was catching up.
It was starting to catch up.
Idea, right? So you could have this idea, and suddenly you had the actual technical know-how to make it happen.
Absolutely. There seemed to be no limit to what man could do. And so the time had come, it seemed, to build an interoceanic canal across Central America.
And we will get to the rest of that story on the next episode of History for Cocktail Parties. Remember to like, subscribe, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, we'd love it if people would leave comments. That really helps on the algorithm, whether you like it or not. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Thank you so much for listening. This is History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians Thornton Kennedy and James Ottley.